Trap squad, 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 trap squad. Hey, clickbaity political. Yeah, Thirsttrap, trap squad, squirrel squad. Our mission is critical to speak the truth to the masses. We here for the fight. We ain't started, but we here to finish it. Sick and tired of seeing the privilege. Take advantage of the weak and the innocent. So we let a voice be heard. Every single weeknight, unapologetic. Black people, despite this white supremacist system that we live through on a daily, we still throwing up those acorns cause we represent clickbaity. Trap squad, trap squad, trap squad, let me hear ya. Trap squad, trap squad, throw those squirrels up if you with it. Trap squad, trap squad, yeah I see you, yeah I see you. Trap squad, trap squad, trap squad, Thirsttrap, trap squad, trap squad, trap squad, let me hear ya. Trap squad, trap squad, throw those squirrels up if you with it. Trap squad, trap squad, yeah I see you, yeah I see you. Trap squad, trap squad, trap squad, Thirsttrap, trap squad, trap squad, trap squad, trap squad.
All right.
Oh, we on the air. 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Time. What's up, Clickbaity? What's up, y'all?
Welcome everyone to another episode of Clickbaity Political Thirst Trap. I am one of your two hosts, Marcus Farrell, and I'm joined by my brother from another mother, Mondale Robinson. Mondale, how you doing, man?
I'm here, bro. I'm sorry to the clan for missing y'all yesterday, or I should say yesterweek. We are back. That will not happen on a regular basis. But I needed some personal time. My doctor recommended I slow down a little bit. But man, I'm good. I'm real good. How about yourself? How you doing?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. A lot of interesting news that I'm gonna update folks on in the cannabis world. I mean, inequity in cannabis across the nation. I am going to give a little advice to folks who are interested in, on today's show, I am going to give a little advice for folks who are interested in joining the legal cannabis industry, specifically and particularly Black people, brown people, people of color, and our women of color, right? Because and women in general, but I am going to say that there's a huge influx of women, white women, who are in the cannabis industry. And also, I did want to, I want to give a shout out to all the women during Women's History Month. I want to give a shout out yesterday for Women's Equal Pay Day. But Mondale, we have a problem, and I want to talk about that.
Let's go, bro.
All right, listen, man. Women's History Month is very, very, very important. Women's equal pay is very, very, very important. But we as Black people need to understand that there is a very, very, very small, I'm talking about within pennies difference of how much Black men get paid in comparison to Black women. And that comparison pales in the comparison to how much more money that white women make. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it once and for all. When it comes down to equal pay, we need to be having a conversation about culture, literally culture in itself. We need to have a conversation about culture. We need to have a conversation about how Black people, our race, organically gets paid, and how I believe that white feminism, which we've talked about before, has sort of taken precedent over the conversation about equal pay in general. And I'm not just talking about Black cisgender men. I'm talking about transgender men. I'm talking about anybody who identifies as male. We all get paid less than white women. We don't have a day where it is Black people's equal pay day, right? And I'm going to go through a couple of experiences that I had in my life where someone who was white, younger than me, less experience and education, got paid more than me for a job that they were actually beneath me for. There have been 3 campaigns that I worked on where a white woman who was less educated than me, who had less experience than me, who had less qualifications than me, and had a lower title than me, got paid thousands of dollars more than me. Why is that? Because that white woman knew 2 things. Number 1, how to ask for it, and number 2, her value when it came down to society. We are lying to ourselves if we think that black men and white women should be in the same conversation about equal pay. There's somewhere around a $2 difference, if that. It might be a lot more, somewhere around a $2 difference in the amount of money that black men, black women get paid in comparison to white women. And definitely, we haven't even mentioned the trump card, white men, right? Asian men, and white women are the top 3 pay getters in America right now. And there's stats behind that. That's a factual thing. But I'm not hating on anyone trying to get equal pay. What I'm hating on is the thought process that all men are created equal when it comes down to pay. That is absolutely not true whatsoever. And I want to make that statement. And you could call me a hotep, you could call me misogynistic, but when I say that black men are not getting paid as much as white women, then the conversation about women's equal pay day, if it ain't centered around black women, I really don't care about it. And if it's not centered around black people, I really don't care about it. Right? We have co-opted someone else's fight in this conversation. And when you think about the amount of unemployment in general within the black community, black women and black men, the amount of unemployment, the amount of us who don't have jobs whatsoever, it's all, as they say in my dear Atlanta, Georgia, it's all cap. It's all cap. So before I wanted to start the show off, because there was a lot of people in my inbox when I pointed out how much money on Twitter, when I pointed out how much money African-American men and women make in comparison to white women, and how the victimization model for white women kind of equates in all segments of society to black people. Now I want to make this very clear. White women are discriminated against from white men, not black men. We don't have power. We don't hire and fire you. But these conversations about equity, and you guys get involved in every single equity thing that's in America right now. And it's crazy to me because they can get involved in an equity conversation, get the benefits of an equity conversation, and then go home to a white husband. They could get the benefits of an equity conversation, and they started off their journey with $250,000 safety fund or fund from their dad or their parents. And I'm not saying all, because all is a sequitur that I do not want to get into, but I do want to talk about that right there because it's completely unfair. When I think about the cannabis industry and how many different licenses that I apply for, and how many different states that have equity conversations. And you know the way that they get around equity, you know they get around in cannabis and in a lot of other places, you know what they do? They add 2 things to it.
Gender.
They add, you have to be a veteran. They always say person of color, black, white, whatever, black, Latino, whatever. They always say you have to be a person of color and you have to be a woman. What does that immediately do? That immediately allows the floodgates of guys who are millionaires and billionaires who already have a lot of money to send their wife in for a business opportunity that they shouldn't be qualified for because they're sitting on money and they're sitting on values and they're sitting on privilege that we don't have. So, yeah. I just wanted to start the show off with that because, to be honest with you, as it stands right now, the equal pay conversation is cap as fuck.
Yeah, I don't think it's much of a conversation, honestly, but it's not new if you consider different aspects of the world, like outside of the business world. I mean, white woman feminism has never been the ally of black men. If we go back to when the 15th Amendment was passed, the argument wasn't that black women deserve the right to vote. It was, how are you going to let black men vote before you let white women vote, right? How are you going to let these savages vote before you let us vote? And we know who the greatest benefactor of the affirmative action would allow, which was supposed to create parity in how we selected college students. White women were the greatest benefactors of that. So we've been seeing white men learn how to finesse through white women the system. And I think when we're not, this is the problem with policies. And I was having this conversation earlier about reparations with one of the Bernie supporters, because he chose to put a post online and say, oh, it was a picture of Bernie in 97 or maybe 87 supporting at a LGBTQI event and saying Elizabeth Warren was anti-LGBTQI in 87, was anti. Then they said they named another progressive who was anti. Oh no, not a progressive. They named Biden, who was anti-LGBTQI at the same time. It's like, but look at your boy Bernie. Always just wanted. He said, and his post was just want to let people know who was with you when it was uncool to be with you or not popular. And I said, well, if that's the case, then we should also point out the fact that Bernie wasn't for reparations. So that means he wasn't with us until 2020 when he said it was for reparation. And he was like, oh, it's a nuanced conversation because Bernie support policies that are beneficial to Black people. So, and I said all that to say is when we're not explicit in policy, when we're not saying this is for Black people, we know that white people will benefit more than we will. Specifically in this conversation, white women tend to be able to take advantage of policies that are designed for so-called minorities in this country. So this argument that you're making, anybody that has like hard feelings about it, I'll just say that they're sitting in an uncomfortable space because they're probably benefiting from this privilege that you're criticizing right now. It is beyond stupid to say that Black men are anywhere in parity as it pertains to the lived experience of what white women experience in America, especially when you couple the fact that we are the leading demographic that is likely to be murdered percentage-wise by cops, right? And if you're talking about snuffing out life and what that does to income and earnability, then you have to consider the fact that black men specifically and the rate we die from cops is a serious situation that we should explore on this show in a serious manner. Just so for anybody that needs to know, Black men are the least earning men in this country. We earn 87 cents to every white man's dollar. Native Americans earn 91 cents. Latinos earn somewhere around 90, I guess, 90, probably pretty close to what Native Americans earn, 90 something, 92%. And then Asian American men earn $1.15 for every dollar that white men earn. So the Black man experience is not the experience of white men, and definitely not the experience of of Asian American men who are earning more than white men. So when people talk about this conversation, Marcus, about women parity, they're really not talking, like you said, about Black women. They're definitely not talking about Black men. So I agree with you in celebrating the idea that there's parity for some folk, but also acknowledging the fact that this conversation leaves out the Black experience in a serious manner. Which is part of the reason, Marcus, I think I wanted to talk about, make this show less political and more electoral, grounded in the work that we do and how taxing it is to do this work and the toll it takes on us to show up every cycle, even when it's not an election, like a federal election. We're still doing this work to engage our communities in a way that people don't value. And we know that to be true because donors disappear in these off years, which requires us to spend down our savings that are supposedly reserved for electoral years to do the work to engage, so we don't show up transactionally. And I think our squirrel gang deserves to know that there's a huge difference between electoral work and political work. And the work that we do is electoral work. We're not a political organization in the sense that we show up for the party, or we're not one of their auxiliaries, or for candidates. We don't do that work. We do the work of engaging Black men around the electoral process to create power so as to address issues like the pay gap that exists in this country for us. And it's also worth noting that there are, and I know people think this is a controversial statement, but there are more of us that are in the carceral system, either prison, jail, probation, parole, than were on plantations at any time during slavery. And that's a serious thing, especially when you consider the fact that we are the only demographic where our women are outperforming us. And I'm not saying that women should be performing less as it pertains to college degrees or attainment, but I am saying that it's worth mentioning if we're talking about how people earn money and what is necessary to raise your wage. And going one step further, it is also a a direct result of America's racism that Black men are the only demographic that can be born to a middle class, upper middle class, or wealthy family, and before they die, they're likely to experience poverty or drop down in economic class. That is a thing that is unique to the Black man in this country, and it's not because we are lazy. It's not because we're not ambitious. It is directly linked to the racist systems that make America America.
Right. I'm happy that you brought up electoral work, because I forgot to mention this to you during the show, but I was planning on doing this for a long time, and I didn't do it. So, Squirrel Gang, obviously, this is going to be a different type of episode for us. We're not going to dwell too deeply into the modern news, because we can do that all day. I mean, and the only news that I know is that Ukraine got a couple $1 billion before Black people got a couple $1 billion for reparations. But we can move on to that. Move on from that. This show is going to be a little different, because I think Mondale and I have a couple of things that have been on our mind, and I think it's been a little bit pressing to both of us. And that my first topic was one of them. My next topic is this right here. You can run for office. You can run for office. And today I'm going to tell you how. I'm a veteran of over 25 campaigns in the political spectrum. I've managed, knocked on doors, got volunteers, was a candidate myself, raised money, spent money, did commercials, did ads, pretty much did radio commercials. I pretty much did it all. And I'm going to drop to you a couple things about the basics, right? Whether you want to be a campaign manager or whether you want to be a candidate yourself. I'm going to start with the basics. You have to have the audacity to run is the first thing that you have to do. That means that you have to look around your district, whatever office that you want to run for, and say to yourself, either I can do it better, I can do it more efficient, or I can make a more equitable process. That's the first thing you have to decide. And then you say, hey, well, now I want to run for office. What do I have to do? Well, if you're a candidate, the first thing you have to do is figure out how to get on the ballot. That means that some states, you have to have a certain amount of signatures. If you want to run for the mayor of Chicago, you need 12,500 signatures to be the mayor of Chicago. That means 12,500 registered voters have to sign your petition to get on the ballot. If you want to be in the state house here in the state of Georgia, I think you could just come up with a certain fee or the money. So some states require you to have fee and money. Some states require you to have a certain amount of signatures, and some states just let you sign up and run for office.
Let me throw this in real quick, Marcus. Usually the amount of signatures you need are also tied to the percentage of the voters that participated in the previous presidential election. So you need a certain percentage of that. I think that's how it works. And
that's right. That's
so
right.
Chicago, if 1.2 million voters voted in the presidential election, you need 10%. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if it's that percentage, but it's
I think Chicago, it was the last mayor's race, I believe. I believe in Chicago was the last mayor. You need to have a certain percentage of the last mayor's race or the total overall vote for the last mayor's race to actually get on the ballot, right? And sometimes those numbers are stagnant and sometimes those numbers are fluid. The next thing you need to do is figure out one out of two things, and a lot of people make this mistake early. You need to figure out how you're going to fund your campaign, and you need to figure out how you're going to run your campaign. And one thing can happen before the other one, but imagine what time period you have. You can't hire anybody to run your campaign until you have some money. That means that you either come into a campaign with X amount of dollars, or you raise that money from your family and friends and people who think just like you. So sometimes that means the first thing that you do as a person who is running for office is hire a fundraiser. Now, I am not necessarily saying that a fundraiser is immediately necessary. As a matter of fact, for some seats, there's such a small amount of votes that you need to get that you don't necessarily need a fundraiser. You just need to constantly be on your phone, calling through your cycle, calling through every single thing and every single person that you know on the earth, and shamelessly say to them, I need you to donate money to my campaign. So in order to donate to your campaign, what do you need? You need to set up a campaign account, right? You need to file with the Secretary of State. You need to, in whatever state that you are in, and you need to designate yourself as an official candidate before you've made the ballot or after you made the ballot, and you're going to usually show up. And then you need to go to the bank. You need to set up an account, and whether that's infinite content for a dog catcher on Wells Fargo, or Chuck Diesel for mayor at whatever, you need to set up your bank account, right? And then you need to hire a fundraiser. Now, most good fundraisers, real quick, they understand one thing: you ain't got no money yet. They do. So a fundraiser will work for free for you for a month, and then they're going to gauge your work ethic. They're going to gauge how much call time that you do. What's call time, you ask? Call time is the amount of time that you spend on the phone dollar for dollars. Mondale, am I missing something? Because I think we can go a little further.
I don't think you're missing anything. I would say I would also add that, you know, you might want to do a landscape. You know, say create a landscape document, meaning you test and see what the win number is. Is there a valid pathway to victory for you to be on the ballot? And if it is, then you should, like Marcus said, take all of those steps. I would add one more thing about fundraising and fundraisers. The idea of fundraising through call time is inherently racist as also, because what happens is we know that white people will raise more money because white people are more comfortable giving money to white candidates. This isn't to say that black people don't have money. It is to say that white people have more liquid than black people do. So call time is not as productive for black candidates as it is for white candidates. And we should acknowledge that, because it matters, because what happens is, especially if you're running for a federal seat, the party and its auxiliaries will start saying, oh, you're not a viable candidate because you've not raised a certain amount of money, or they won't even talk to you in certain cases if you don't have enough money raised. When in actuality, they know that the system that they created has its racial gatekeepers preventing you to raise that threshold. So what we will say is, if you don't have the ability to raise, there's not a certain amount of money you need to win elections. We've seen people with the most amount of money lose election over and over again. This is the case with the past few presidential elections, right? So we know what that is. Infinite content. A win number is taking the last 3 like elections and dividing that number and adding 1 vote to it. And that is your majority of voters. So when I say last 3 like elections, you don't want to say, oh, I want to take the election from 2017, 2021, 2020, and 2019. Those are not the last 3 like elections. If you were running for Congress this cycle, you would take the last 3 midterm elections. So that would be 2020, that would be 2018, 2018, 2016, and then 2014. So, and then you would take those 3 numbers, how many people participated in the election cycle in your district, then you would divide it by 3 and add 1 vote. But then you also need to take into account the growth. So you need to look at how many new voters have been added to the voting roll in your district, and then take that percentage and make sure you're adding that number to it as well.
Mondale.
So that's a win number. Go ahead, Marcus.
Mondale, yeah, very good point. And I want to also say, on the point of raising money, that's why we are fans of clean elections, where the government matches the amount of money that you have, so it's equal and fair. I think every election should be a clean election. Therefore, you take out all the corruption in politics. Every single race should be a clean election. Every single race should be a clean election. But that is something that is years down the road in an equitable country. And we're not in that equitable country. Now, you have raised money. You paid your fundraiser anywhere from $3,000 to $7,000 for that first month. Hopefully you still have a couple bucks left. What's the next thing you want to do? Well, maybe you don't have any clue on how to create a win number. Maybe you don't have a clue on how to create a landscape. Maybe you don't even know what the fuck a landscape is, even after Mondale said it. So you have to come back to this episode and learn what a landscape is. Then you're going to have to find people who do that. And the first person that most people find after they find their fundraiser, or even before they find their fundraiser, is a campaign manager. Campaign manager. The person who's going to handle your day-to-day. The person who should be deciding and creating the budget. Because the budget is the plan, and the plan is the budget, right? So you can't do anything outside of your budget as a candidate unless you are doing a heavy amount of door knocking yourself. But we'll get to that in 1 second. A campaign manager should know how to create a win number. If your campaign manager ever says the win number that ends in 0, 2,
Fire them.
4, 8, 6, fire them immediately, because they have no earthly idea what they're doing. I repeat, if your campaign manager or a campaign manager says, you say, hey, campaign manager, what's the win number? And they say
15
42,000 people. Then
15,000.
that person needs to be fired.
Yeah.
Because there's no such thing as a win number that ends in an even number. Very simple stuff, very basic stuff, but you need to know these things. So you hire a campaign manager, and here's the thing about campaign managers. They come in all shapes. They come in all sizes. There's white people who know how to work in black neighborhoods. There's black people who know how to work in white neighborhoods. But the thing about a campaign manager is you have to trust your campaign manager and know that this person has your back and won't make bad decisions with your capital and all that money that you have raised. Your campaign manager should be your biggest foe at times on a campaign. You know why? Because you're not, as a candidate, you're not going to want to do call time. No candidate does. I didn't want to do it. I did a lot of it, but I hated every single moment of it until you get really comfortable and really confident in your call time and raising money, right? Oh, listen, this is not sexy, but I need folks who watch Clickbaity Political Thirst Trap to understand how to run for office. Mondell, what's the next position that you hire for a campaign after your campaign manager?
Somebody in the field. I would also say that your campaign manager should not come from a media background, because they're going to force you to think about TV ads. They're going to force you to think about things that are not direct voter contact. Things that are not direct voter contact are mail, TV ads, and radio ads. And while they are an important factor, they're not the most important thing. We know they yield less voter turnout. Let me answer real quick. Infinite content, your comment is absolutely correct. That is actually what a win number is. If you're running for mayor election, you take the last 3 mayoral elections, divide by 3, and then add 1. That's a win number. So make sure I would say a good campaign manager has his or her or non-gender conforming, they have their roots in I would say in field. And so this is why after you hire a campaign manager, that person probably already knows who they want to do their field. Because a good campaign manager knows a good field person. Because
what's the field, Mondell?
Field is a person who is in charge of doing direct voter contact. These are the people who will talk to more voters than the candidate. Actually, so that person should be a great representative of the candidate, because most people in your district will not hear or see you directly during the campaign. It's impossible for a candidate to talk to every voter in their district, but their field team is tasked with doing just that. Talking to the people in your universe, meaning the people that you saw as your viable pathway to victory. So a field plan or a field manager or director is a person who will build out your canvassing program, your texting program, your phone program, and your social media program, and make sure that it's changing with the complexities of the campaign. So that's what a field manager or field director will do.
Now, after you have your field manager will come up with a plan, and that plan is going to now officially be a part of the budget. They should be looking at some sort of voter file to decide whether they want to knock on X amount of doors at a certain amount of time with 3 runs on the doors or 2 runs on the doors or 3 cycles. And that means knocking on the doors multiple times. One time might be for introduction and education. Another time might be for a yes. And the last time will be for turnout. And we'll get to that in a second. If you are a candidate and you're raising money, you could have multiple staff members that do all of these different things. But if you can't raise money, then your campaign manager probably is going to be your field director. Your campaign manager is also probably going to be your digital director. Your campaign manager definitely will be your communications director. Your campaign manager will be your whole staff. That's why you want to raise a lot of money. Because if you can raise a lot of money and pay your staff, they can focus in and do a better job at all these different positions instead of just having one person do 4 or 5 things.
It is worth noting. It is worth noting though, on small races, it's a highly likelihood that you will not have a full staff. When you're working on small elections, it is illogical to believe that you're going to have a campaign manager, field director, and canvassers that aren't volunteers. Usually what happens is on smaller races, there are a lot of volunteers that are engaged in your campaign that run these roles so the smaller a race, the higher likelihood that you have a volunteer staff versus a paid staff. And that's not that common.
Yep. The next position that you're going to be looking at, if you're deciding to fill out a whole staff, 2 more positions that usually come into the fray, and that is a political director, a digital director, and also a communications director. Now, on my campaign, I was my digital director, and I also was my own communications director. I wrote out my own talking points. But the bigger the campaign, and the more money you probably will raise, and the more money that you probably raise. And the reason why you raise more money, because there's going to be a lot more interest from different entities about that. Now, a political director, this person is charged with making sure you get all the endorsements. This person is charged with making sure that your policy matches the people. This person is charged with making sure that every single thing that you do in a campaign is damn near politically correct, and also making sure that they advertise you to like-minded organizations. So if you come in and say, listen, one of my platforms is I want to make sure that everybody in my district gets paid a living wage, then your political director's task is to find every like-minded organization and find that organization and say, my candidate, if elected, will fight for a living wage. Therefore, you might get unions to support you. Therefore, you might get Black Male Voter Project to support you. Therefore, you might get DFA to support you, or Our Revolution and different organizations like that. I was blessed enough to get an endorsement from DFA, Our Revolution, YDA, all kinds of different organizations when I ran for office. And me and my campaign manager were doing dual things with getting endorsements. When I worked for Stacey Abrams, one of the first calls that I made was to this brother that's sitting across the screen from me right now to make sure that DFA endorsed our campaign. Therefore, she had one of the earliest endorsements, and the first endorser for Stacey Abrams and her last run was Democracy for America, and that's directly due to the conversations and the relationship that me and Mondale had. If that's a fair statement, Mondale?
That's accurate, bro. And I think people don't understand. So like when you're running an election as large as Stacey Abrams' last election, we're talking about a gubernatorial election for the state of Georgia, which has around 6,200,000 voters registered to vote. You're going to need a lot of capital to run that race. And DFA getting an endorsement early, we actually endorsed Stacey before she even announced. And Marcus said it's because of the relationship and him making that call early on and putting it on our radar. And what happened was Stacey was not the Stacey Abrams we know now. She was not a national figure. DFA, however, brought her to an organization called Netroots. And when we did that, we had a bunch of meetings with a lot of other national organizations that do endorsement and also provide resources. And in doing that, we introduced her to millions through Move On's membership, which is the largest progressive organization, DFA membership, which is about 12 million, second largest progressive organization, and then other organizations got on board as well. And doing that, she was able to raise money from those individual members and also those organizations, which was the early seed money for her and Andrew Gillum as well at the same time. So that's important. Let me go back to something about campaign manager. I think we skipped, Marcus.
Okay.
It is extremely important. It's vital that if you have a campaign manager that you can tell what to do and they always listen to you and you're not listening to them, that's the wrong fit. The campaign manager, you are, as a candidate, you are the iPhone, and the campaign manager needs to be Steve Jobs. So if your campaign manager is not directing you in what's going to work, then you are actually in a bad space. Are you talking to Woody right now, Marcus? Did you just tell Woody to sit down? Man, leave that dog alone. Leave that dog alone. I think, and just so people who are tune in normally to see us talk about politics, this is extremely important because there are no politicians without electoral process, right? And the electoral process, I hear people say, I don't want to participate, there's no need to participate, or my vote don't matter. I'm telling you all, this is $1 billion industry, and it absolutely matters. And it matters so much because what happens is we are stuck in the rigmarole of what status quo is. And that we can't pretend as people who care about the electoral process that the way that we play politics on the left is nothing but a failure. And when we do pretend that it's anything other than failure, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, because when we're celebrating the fact that there are more Democrats registered to vote in North Carolina than Republicans, there are more Democrats registered to vote in a few southern states, but we don't control those states. It's directly linked to the failures of us doing the same thing we've always done, which is basically prioritizing conservative leaning white voters over the people who vote 60% in Democratic base, which are Black voters. And it is also the unethical grouping of all minorities. Black voters do not vote like Hispanic voters. Hispanic voters are split 50-50, almost like white voters as it pertains to if they're going to vote for Democrats or Republican. And the same is true for Asian Americans. We saw right now the filing for Georgia parties have just ended. There are 14, there are 25, I think, Asians that have registered to vote, Asian Americans who registered to vote. Registered to run for office in that state. And of them, 7 men are Democrats and 7 men are Republicans. So that's not the case for Black voters. So when we group our minority voters in the same manner, then we're doing a disservice to those communities. And it's also tacky when we see people continuing to talk about issues that Republicans bring forward, i.e. critical race theory. Critical race theory is not a top issue for Black voters, and yet the Democratic Party still is spending so much money trying to combat Republicans on this. All I'm saying is you're not going to gain or lose a voter. You're not going to lose a Black voter because the Republicans say you support critical race theory. So when you're talking about that, you're losing time when you can be talking about an issue that is important to Black folk, which is right now inflation, economic issues, these gas prices, and also the need for criminal justice reform and voting rights. And when you're not talking about those issues and you're talking about critical race theory, you're doing a disservice to the work that we do, and also the willingness for Black voters to vote when you talk about issues that are important to them. So all of this falls into the electoral process where we're doing disservices to Black voters.
Hey, listen, speaking of critical race theory, Beto needs to sit his ass down somewhere, right? Like, that's all I'm going to say. There shouldn't be any single Democrat that actually says we don't need to teach critical race theory, and that actually came out of Beto's mouth. This is important for another reason also. I'm gonna plug my own show here, Clickbaity Political Thirst Trap. When y'all listen to us and you listen to Clickbaity Political Thirst Trap, you might think sometimes these are just 2 Black men who are just talking shit all the time. But I need you to know something. We're OGs when it comes down to electoral politics. The both of us, right? There's a lot of people who have million folks following them that have no earthly idea how politics really works.
I mean, Mark, let's keep it a buck. This country prioritized LeBron James' political thought over yours and mine. LeBron James knows nothing about politics, but because he's a famous person, he starts an organization. He's not even funding the organization that he started. He's actually fundraising for that organization. That is absolutely disgusting. Nobody's going to send their kid to me over LeBron James to learn how to shoot free throws.
Right. Well, I don't have a problem with LeBron. I'm just happy that he's doing something with his name, because I know a lot of brothers that don't do that, but that's neither here nor that's neither, you know what I mean? Like, he's doing something, right? And using his name where there are millions of brothers and sisters who are using their platforms to talk shit and don't even know how to do this. And we're going to take our time today to make sure that this is on record, along with all the other things that we said about Clickbaity Political Thirst Trap on Clickbaity Political Thirst Trap. This is on record. We're qualified to talk politics, and we're going to continue to talk politics because we know from the rooter to the tutor what it takes to get people elected. We know from the rooter to the tutor how to get laws passed. We know from beginning the alpha to the omega about why we lose and why we are where we are. We've worked on campaigns. Right. We've done these campaigns. We've done this work. I've worked on every single position that a campaign could possibly provide, from a general consultant to a campaign manager to a volunteer canvasser to a field director and all these things, right? Yep. And speaking of more positions, because I think we need to kind of go through, I kind of want to go through this and get to election day. If that's cool with you, Mondale.
Yeah, but I think we should just, before we get to election day, because it's important, I think people should know that what's inherent in campaigns is something that we see all the time, right? Racism, Marcus talked about that, where someone lower than him, not lower in stature, but in job titles, making more money than him. That's linked to the inherent racism that's in traditional campaigns. Then also we have to talk about the failure of traditional campaign efforts because of the way they show up, and they show up traditionally. And then we also need to talk about what the solution is, and that solution is culturally competent programs that talk to people year round, not just in 2-month spurts when it's time to turn out voters. So yeah, Marcus, I think it's important that we move on to talking about election day. But let me address a couple of things that Tyrone has said in the chat. First, Tyrone has said that there's a fear of losing independence. Let me just say this: there are no such thing as independence in this country. There are tons of people that are registered independent, but study after study show that people that are registered independent always vote the same way. So if you're a conservative leaning independent voter, you always vote for Republicans, and then there are other independents who always vote for Democrat. So just because people have these labels, we have it confused. People support what their values are, regardless of which party they're registered to vote in. So it doesn't matter that someone is registered non-party or they're registered independent. They're going to vote the same way they always vote. So there's no chance of losing an independent that supports Democratic policies, because that person will always vote that way. That's just a myth that people use. As it pertains to us not voting always, this is another comment from Tynus. I don't think that we don't vote properly. I think that's a misnomer. People vote when their resources spent on their issues or prioritizing their issues. And because the parties does a horrible job of prioritizing the issues of Black and voters living on the margins, then we see lower turnout from people who don't have the ability to see themselves in a self-actualized way because they're too busy living life and trying to pay bills and eat.
Right. I highlighted Cindy D's comment because in this conversation, normally in Clickbaity, what we do, Trap Squad, is we go in deep and we go in on Democrats. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different to answer Cindy D's statement. Democrats are horrible at messaging. That's why. Well, let me tell you about messaging. You don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican or anybody to have great messaging. In your campaign, as a candidate, you control all the buttons. If you raise enough money, hire the right people, and ignore some of the people that always lose, you will end up having great messaging. What candidates do in this process, since we're going through from beginning to end, is candidates do two things. While they're raising money, they hear little whispers. Well, if you say this, that, and the other, then this party or this person in the party is going to open up the floodgates for you. If you don't talk about this, then there's a certain person that's going to give you money. And then also, when you go looking for staff, sometimes the first place that candidates go looking for staff is the same people that don't want you to say anything about politics. So sometimes you have to create your own talking points and create your own staff and understand that you have progressive people who are willing to talk about the issues that are representing your campaign if we have a messaging problem. That means what? That means creating a platform that actually speaks to the people, and you don't give a damn what anyone outside of your campaign says except the voter. Missed a very important portion of how to run a campaign. And it starts right around the same time that you actually launch your campaign, or maybe a couple of days beforehand if you have the money. And this is a very expensive venture, but it can be cheap if you know how to utilize different tools that are available. And that's called polling. That's right, polling. Polling works. And polling is more than just somebody on the phone calling up 2,000, a sample size. That's a small segment of the whole society, that whole voting block that is representative of that voting block, right? Because you're not going to call every voter until you're trying to turn them out. You're going to try to call the voters and get their idea of what they believe in their community. That means that a certain amount of questions are going to be asked on behalf of your campaign to find out, hey, do you like my candidate? Have you ever heard of my candidate's name before? Hey, have you ever, do you like my opponent? Or do you plan on voting at all this time around? You're not voting? Why aren't you voting? These basic questions. Do you believe in police reform? Do you have a problem with the term defund the police? Right? These are statements that you need to be putting into polls. And polls are typically expensive, especially if you use some of the posters that are well known right now. But there are other ways to get around it. There are voter files that have Call Fire. There's a program called Call Fire that you can basically have a robo dial, and that is a computer automated phone that will give you responses. And also, the most classical way of finding out information in polling is knocking on somebody's door. Knocking on someone's door.
And I would say even now, because majority of voters that are under 30 don't want to be called, texting is a wonderful way to poll voters. If you can run a text program for a lot less money than you can a canvassing program. Canvassing, of course, yields better results as it pertains to voter turnout and increasing voters to support your candidate. But texting is a valuable option. People can easily text yes or no about issues. If you ask yes or no questions, you're more likely to get an answer back from voters. So it's a wonderful way to engage voters, and it's definitely better than posters, radio, TV, social media, and all of the other shit that we can't really gauge and control algorithms on. So I think that's absolutely right. Cindy said Republicans seem to be better at messaging than, and it's even if they lie. And it's easy for Republicans to be better because their message is simple. It's racist. If all you got to do is talk about racism and races, it's an easier message to state. It's an easier line to tote. The fact that they're comfortable doing that is absolutely disgusting. So I think, though, when we're talking about polling, it's necessary. Marcus is right. It's necessary to know what the pulse of your community is, because you can say all these issues that may be important to you, and they don't matter at all to the voter. The Democratic Party is notoriously guilty of doing this. They talk about what they think is most important to voters, and they've not polled the right people. So you need to make sure you're polling the right people, because if you're calling conservative voters, asking them their opinion, then your messaging is going to sound extremely conservative. So you need to make sure you're talking to the right people. I would say prioritize those folk who don't normally participate in elections, because speaking a message that resonates with these people or this demographic is more likely to get them to participate in your election and vote for you as a candidate. So what happens is, instead of us doing that as people who are actors in the political space, we generally do the exact opposite. We talk to people who are already going to vote, and we talk about issues that they already care about, which sends a false messaging. So what happens is we end up hearing candidates talk about the working class or middle class, when in actuality, most Americans aren't working class people or middle class folk. They're poor people, and nobody's talking about messaging that resonate with poor people. So it's important that you're talking to sporadic voters. That's a term that I don't like. It's a term that means people who don't vote normally. It's also important that you talk to people who are non-voters, because your messaging being on cue to what moves them and what motivates them will likely get you voters that nobody else is going to talk to.
Next, we're going to talk about earned media and media, communications and media. You're going to need all of these things as much as possible to get free publicity. Free publicity. That's the goal. If you don't have to pay for publicity, you have more money to knock on doors. You have more money to do the things that you want to do, like throw events, knock on doors, and maybe even have some more fundraisers. Free publicity is like awesome commercials. Free publicity is also the way that earned media and media is also the way that you can knock your opponent down. So I've been looking in the chats, and I've been seeing a lot of conversations surrounding Democrats don't do this and Democrats don't do that. Guys, I don't give a damn about what a Democrat does. What I'm talking to, I'm talking to you. I am talking to you. We got to stop complaining, and we got to start doing. And today we're going to give you a basic lesson on how to do this yourself. Go back and watch every single moment of this episode. Please take some notes, because we want you to do this yourself in your own district. This is very important for us, right? You got to do it the right way. If you watch a clickbaity political thirst trap and you go and run for office, we need you to win. That is that simple. We need a constituency of people to win races that understand that blackness, progressiveness, and also just being a free person and trying to do things for your community is okay. So, earned media, I'm going to get back to that. Every single newspaper and website every single article has a person on it that wrote that article. And underneath that person's name is an email address and a phone number, and also their Twitter handle. You and your team need to spend 2 or 3 days going through every single person that you know that reaches your constituency in your area. Not read all their articles, but create a list of media people. Just like you'll create a list of donors, you're going to create a list of media people. And you, or either your communications director or your campaign manager or a volunteer, is going to email every single thing that you do on your campaign to that person in the form of a press release. You can look at your inbox right now. I guarantee you, if you ever donate to the campaign, any campaign, there's a press release in your inbox right now. You can copy that format and put what your movements are to make sure that your conversation about the things that you want to talk about are put out there. You can also go ahead and talk to the news stations and say, I want to interview and I want to talk about my race. And if you find any bad news, and we'll talk about that in a second, it's called opposition research. If you find any bad news about your opponent, you can also elevate that news in the newspaper, in the press, because there's nothing more than the press likes than drama. Nothing more than drama. Opposition research. Am I missing anything about communications? There's a lot more communications, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot more to communication. I think that's a good overview of the purpose of communications as it pertains to political campaigns. I will say this: another tool that is underused and is a great way to get you into your local papers if you're running a local office is op-eds. Using op-eds is a wonderful way to get your platform out there. Your platform is the work that the political director that Marcus talked about earlier is doing. And also where you stand on issues that are important to the community, which requires you to know what's important to the community, which is why you want to knock on doors and get a nice sample of what issues are most important to the voters that will be voting for you.
That's right. You know what else sparked this conversation for me, Mondale?
What's that?
Just briefly. I want reparations to happen. I mean, I really want it to happen. And the problem is that the people who lead the reparations movement right now, a lot of them are the blow it all up, destroy everything, burn it down types, and we don't need the system to get reparations. That's the most idiotic thought process in the history of mankind. Do you think these white people with their money, that our money in their bank accounts, are just going to give it to us off of pity, off of hey, it's the right thing to do? No, we have to fight for it within a system. And guess what? I mean, unless you really run up on these folks in their city hall, or unless you got to remember they got guns that'll shoot our back from where they stay at. Thank you, Andre 3000. We have to actually do some things a little bit differently, and yelling and screaming in the Twitter void is not going to do anything. I'm trying to teach you how to run for office so you can go get reparations for us. I need one of y'all, two of y'all, 5 of y'all, 90 of y'all to be congressmen, congresswomen, congresspersons, right? So this is very important why I said what I'm saying right now. Back to it. Opposition research. That's basically getting any information or any dirt on your opponent that you possibly can. I'm not the biggest fan of doing that. Some people don't like doing it. Some people think it's immoral and like to run clean races. But when it comes down to it, y'all beloved Nina Turner got destroyed off of opposition research. And hopefully it doesn't work again, right? Opposition research takes down some of the best candidates because living a black existence gives fodder to anybody, because white folks and people who run the political system don't understand that not being able to pay off your college loans is not a hit piece, it's American piece. Stacey Abrams got hit for months and months because she had student debt. Student debt. And guess what this was? This was a Democrat. Her Democratic primary opponent was the person who was pushing the fact that she had student debts. So you also have to have a very smart, strategic, flexible communications team and a communications plan that can fire back on anything that they bring up. You can fire back on it and maybe even be a little snarky. Oh, well, I'm happy that you had a gold spoon in your mouth that you don't have student debts, because most of my district does have that. What am I missing? I'm missing something big, Mondale. I'm missing something huge.
I don't think so. I think that's spot on. I would say this before we go, Marcus. This is like a little selfless plug. There's a new book coming out called Power Concedes Nothing. It's going to be hitting shelves pretty soon. Everybody should go get that book. There's a section in there where where I'm in the book, and I talk about what Black electoral power looks like, and the reason we can't divorce this system, this burn it down approach you're talking about, Marcus, is a failed strategy, and it makes no sense if we are to get us free. So I think, like I said, it's a selfless plug, but it's what we're talking about right now as it pertains to what we need to do, what we need to be doing to ensure that Black people have a voice, not just at a table, not to be at a table, just to be at a table, but to ensure that food is going to all segments of this population. And when I say food, I'm using it proverbially because I'm talking about resources in general, and we usually are left out of the resource line. And reparations is the way that we gain equity in this country. And I'm not talking about equality, because equality is something completely different than equity. Equality say we all have a box to stand on that's the same height, but equality does not address racial past, right? Equality, if all of us had the same box or the same amount of money, that's not going to address the hundreds of years where we didn't have the same amount of money, because it's not going to change what white people have that doesn't belong to them. So I'm in search of equity, not equality. I think those are my last words for this evening. Thank y'all so much.
Next we have Field. He gonna stay on for this. He ain't gonna let me go.
He gonna bring Field in after I just said my last words, and you know I love Field.
Yeah. Next we're gonna talk about Field to keep Mondale on this channel, because he's already going past his time. But we're gonna, Mondale, would you mind having this conversation this time? We don't have to stay on. All right.
You know, Phil is an entire show itself, and I think
I know, but we need to do the short version of it.
Yeah, I mean,
my goal for Field is having either volunteer or paid staff knock on every single door in the district at least 3 to 5 times.
Yeah, and I would be, you know, and that is that the way you expand the electorate is definitely by knocking on more doors, talking to voters that people don't normally talk to. So Field is an expansive thing that includes canvassing any activity that is a direct voter contact. Some events, I'm not big on events because you don't know who's going to attend those events. You don't know if they're registered to vote in your district and if they're registered to vote at all. So sometimes going to events where there's 10,000 people does not equate to 10,000 voters for you. So events they have their place. They should not be a sacrifice of canvassing or talking to voters on the phone or talking to voters through text message or social media. None of those things should be sacrificed so you can go to an event. I think that's a bad way of campaigning. I do believe, though, it's something to be said about canvassing programs that are culturally competent and also ran in a way where the data is being transferred back so that you can measure the data and see who and what voters are excited about, or what issues are going to move them to the polls, so you can run your campaign properly. You can't, without bad or good data from the Field program, you can't have a successful campaign. And if you do, it's a strike of lightning. So science says that if you run a Field program that is culturally competent, that is addressing the issues and needs and listening to what voters are saying, then you're more likely to win than if you are on 25 TV commercials back to back.
Then you can have a media plan. Right, this is where things get a little tricky, but I planned on going in. Maybe we should just continue this conversation another time. But I plan on going into this because we've talked about it a lot, and I think what I realized, you guys heard the back end of everything and not what we are fighting against within campaigns to do. Right, so you have a media plan. Yeah, you want to get on television because it's a very easy way to contact voters. Right, but it's been proven many times that you don't have to be on television to beat the hell out of your opponent. It's a factual thing. It might make it a little easier in certain markets, especially markets where you have to get into buildings like downtown, like in Manhattan, where you can't even get into buildings and knock on doors. A television program might be really good, but somewhere like DeKalb County or Decatur County, or like somewhere like Tallahassee, Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, where you can knock on doors.
Andre beat Kasim, and he was, he had far less money than Kasim, right? So I'm telling people, like, but he had a Field program that was out there working their ass off, and it was mostly volunteers. So it's absolutely true that there may be a place for TV, but that TV should not determine if you are a viable candidate or not.
Absolutely. So now, guys, you've knocked on the doors, you've raised the money, you've had events, you've done everything that you're supposed to do. You've created an amazing messaging game plan. You've done the op-eds. You've sent the reporters emails. Your press releases have been on point. Then you're a week away from election. And you might not even have enough money to know exactly where you are in the polls. And for this example, I'm going to go ahead and give you this is a primary. This is not a general election. This is a primary. What do you do now? You create your get out the vote plan, something that we've talked about many times, because most candidates, once they get elected, they stop doing get out the vote. But you have to have some version of pulling the people who said, I am going to support your campaign, making sure that those people actually go and vote for you before or on election day. And this is why all these voter suppression laws are so important to fight against right now in America, because these voter suppression laws are going to make it so that the only day that you can vote is Tuesday. And if you're not haven't voted by 7 o'clock on Tuesday of the election day, then you're not going to be able to vote at all. And we know that working class people have to go to work from 8 to 5 o'clock and then can't even make it to their voting location by 7 o'clock to get in the voting lines. That's why we need early voting, and that's why the Republicans are actually shutting down early voting, because white folks who vote for Republicans typically own things, or they're financially set, or they can take the day off, or they can do whatever the hell that they got to do to make sure that they vote. But it's your responsibility, starting maybe 2 weeks before the election, to create a game plan. Actually, a game plan should be created months before the election, at least a month before the election. Your GOTV game plan should be created. But the gist of the GOTV game plan is this right here. Every single person that you've identified as a supporter of your campaign, make sure that they have voted. That means you either call them, knock on their door, send them a mailer with a rip-off, they can send it right back to you for free. But you need to do something to make sure that all of these folks go and vote. And you need to have a field team and a field plan that can check off one by one, person by person, every single person that has said we're gonna support your campaign, and we're gonna knock on that door. We're gonna make sure that we've already voted. You want to see an I voted sticker from every single person. You want to see an I voted sticker from your win number. You want to see an I voted sticker from every single person that's a part of your universe for your win number. So if your win number is 481 people, you want to actually see 529 I voted stickers that voted for you. You always want to overshoot it a little bit, but you got to know exactly where your win number is. Mondale, you got anything on this?
Just that tiredness. I don't know where you're coming from tonight. I can't believe that you put we can take the day off. Most just don't. No, most people don't have the ability to lose a day's salary.
Oh no, I didn't. No. I said you didn't take the day off.
Tiredness said this in the chat.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Not you. So that comment is flawed. People can't afford to miss a day's salary, and I think what we forget is people that are living on the wage, even if they're making $15 an hour, can't afford to sacrifice 8 times 15 out of their salary, because they usually live a paycheck to paycheck, and all that money is accounted for. I think that way of thinking is problematic. What we should be talking about is why voting in this country is not an election day, and why is it still on Tuesday, which is something that the reason people don't even know the reason we vote on Tuesday, Marcus, this is the nerd in me, is because when we used to vote, it used to be you could only vote at the county seat. So people need a day of travel. They couldn't travel on Sunday because people used to go to church. This is when we were an agrarian society, right? So people used to have to go to church on Sundays. So Monday was the travel day. So white men could leave their home and travel to the county seat and vote on Tuesday and then go back. So this idea that we still vote on Tuesday makes no sense, especially since it's not advantageous to the majority of Americans, especially when we don't make it a national holiday. With that, you all, Marcus and I will definitely continue this conversation next Wednesday. I think Marcus, when he come back, Marcus, you can close us out this evening, brother, and then
thank you, Mondale. Mondale is such a fucking awesome nerd. It's amazing sometimes with the knowledge that brother has. Listen, guys, we're gonna do this again. We're gonna go into the basics of politics. I think we're gonna start doing some civics 101 on this show. Because that's missing. We've skipped a step. I personally believe African Americans have skipped a couple of steps recently, and I think we need a reset. I think black people need a reset. I think people of color need a reset, but specifically black people. I think black people need a complete and overall reset. We've let white supremacy and other people's tactics and other people's issues infiltrate everything that we try to do better for our community, and we need to have a reset. Some folks need to come back to the table, right? We either need to bring Jim Clyburn back to the table or support Marcel down there in South Carolina. It's one way or the other, like, because somebody black is going to have that seat, right? We need a reset. We need to have a conversation. We need black folks and brown folks. I mean, we need black women and black men to get back to the table with each other and actually love each other again, including myself. I need to get back to the table and learn how to love again. So we can actually start from the beginning and have a strong community instead of particular interest groups that want to come into our community within a couple of days of an election and divide us. So we are now something black instead of a black something. Hope you understand what I'm saying. Too many of us right now saying that we are a LGBTQ black person instead of a black LGBTQ member. There's too many of us saying right now that I'm a male black or I'm a man that's black instead of I'm a black man. There's too many of us saying right now that I am a progressive black person instead of a black progressive person. We need to come back to the table and create our community again. And we need to do it fast before they take us out forever. And we also need to stop showing loyalty to parties. We need to show loyalty to principles and ideas. And that's all I gotta say about it. Mondale, you got anything, brother?
I didn't have anything, but tiredness. I don't understand where tiredness is. I really want to. And we always welcome people in our chat to come on the show and say their point of view. So if you want to come on next show, just hit us up in the message box, because you're completely off when you say you guess it's just how important it is to people. Voting is extremely important to people. It still does not mean that they have the ability to take off work, because voting can't be more important than feeding your kids when you need every dollar to make sure you have enough. I know people who run out of money before the month is over, and they need that money to feed their kids. So it's not a depend on how important it is to people. I think that way of thinking leads us to these laws that are restrictive on giving people more time to vote, i.e. extending early voting periods, and making mail-in ballots sent out to everybody who's registered to vote a thing that everybody does in this country and every state does. So I think we need to rethink how we see voters who don't participate, because at this point we're criticizing the voter for something that is not convenient for them to do when they're living on the margins. And I think that is important, and we can't let that fall on deaf ears, because people are literally living on the margins. The fact that you have the ability to take vacation is a privilege that most folk don't have. Most people I know don't have paid vacation. So taking vacation is still losing for them. So I think that's something we need to worry about and think about when we're talking about the people that you know, which is that's anecdotal. Like, that's not science. The fact that you know 10, 12 people that take vacation because it's a nice day, that is not the norm, and that is not how science is done. So we need to think about the science that goes into why people don't vote versus why people do vote.
Hey, Mondale, real quick, I gotta take a point of privilege before we bounce. Anna, is something going on, sister? Rain and Anna, somebody got sick, whatever happened, Yeah, whatever happened, man. I'm sending my prayers to y'all. I've been reading it. I'm sending my prayers to y'all, and y'all show up every single time we come on. So like, y'all are like family. I'm sending love and prayers. Also, you're watching Clickbaity Political Thirsttrap. Please like, subscribe, and share, and give us some money if you're on YouTube, so we can have some money to get our producers back from the fray.
Mark is acting like a preacher again, y'all.
Hey man, listen, I'm passing the hat around.
Won't you come?
Won't you come?
Won't you come?
Please? And hey, Mondale, before you bounce, man, you haven't heard the song or the graphics.
I've heard the song and seen the graphics. The world hasn't. We should show people the song. We should see it. Let's do it.
Yeah, thank you for watching Clickbaity Political Thirsttrap, guys. Really appreciate y'all.
Also big up the person who created the song and the graphic.
I did.
They out of the sport game. So yeah,
I think I'm gonna make a graphic about that next time. And also our last I'm sorry, who made the original song? Trap Squad.
Yeah, that was the original song was made by my nephew.
The original song was made by your nephew.
Yeah. So that's that song that said clickbait political, you know, that shit.
Trap Squad God.
That one is critical.
Oh, he killed that.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Peace out.
Yo, go ahead, Marcus.
Marcus and Mondale keep
keeping it real. Yeah, you know they never holding back from telling the facts about this white supremacist system. Hurting brothers and sisters, working towards our freedom. We need them and they need us. Clickbaity, political thirst trap, nothing like average podcast. Speaking truth to power, put them on blast. Cause it's been too long, let's be honest. Clickbaity, political thirst trap, no for sure, they never gonna be whack. Marcus and Mondale with the knowledge, their dedication is so rock solid. So rock solid, solid. Dropping all that knowledge, rock solid, solid. Marcus and Mondale, keeping it real. Yeah, you know they never hold back from telling the facts about this white supremacist system. Hurting brothers and sisters, working towards our freedom. We need them and they need us. Clickbaity, political thirst trap, feeling like average podcast. Speaking truth to power, put them on blast. Cause it's been too long, let's be honest. Clickbaity, political thirst trap, no for sure, they're never gonna be back. Throw those scrolls up if you with it, y'all. It's a thirst trap video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, especially if you're liking this vibe. Yeah.
Trap squad, 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 trap squad. Hey, clickbaity political. Yeah, thirst trap, trap squad, squirrel squad. Our mission is critical to speak the truth to the masses. Yeah. We here for the fight. We ain't started, but we here to finish it. Sick and tired of seeing the privilege. Take advantage of the weak and the innocent. So we let our voice be heard. Every single weeknight. Unapologetic. Yeah. Black people, despite this white supremacist system that we live through on a daily, we still throwing up those acorns cause we represent clickbaity. Yeah. Trap squad, trap squad, trap squad, let me hear ya. Trap squad, trap squad, throw those squirrels up if you with it. Trap squad, trap squad, yeah I see you, yeah I see you. Trap squad, trap squad, trap squad, thirst trap, trap squad, trap squad, trap squad, let me hear ya. Trap squad, trap squad. Throw those squirrels up if you with it. Trap squad, trap squad, yeah I see you, yeah I see you. Trap squad, trap squad, trap squad.